Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video, this time on Olifantsberg's Old Vine Chenin 2019. Now, if you just want the tasting notes on this wine, you can skip ahead to chapters 4 and 5 by clicking on the video timeline at the bottom of this window. But between now and then, I'm going to be talking about all the exciting changes that are taking place at Olifantsberg. So Olifantsberg is an estate in the Breedekloof, and the Breedekloof is a rather large region surrounded by Wellington and Tilbach and Worcester. Olifantsberg itself is set up in the foothills of the Fontainkiesberg Mountains, kind of northeast of the town of Rawsonville. But the actual vineyard that we want to talk about today that goes into this old vine Chenin is more of an urban plot which actually exists off the estate within the town, right on the edge of Rawsonville itself. Now, Olifantsberg are part of the Breedemakers, which is a group of producers we've discussed before who specialize in Chenin Blanc and really try to set themselves apart as a kind of quality over quantity outfit. And Elisme Visser, the winemaker at Olifantsberg, is one of the prominent members of this group. In 2021, Elisme was named Tim Atkins Young Winemaker of the Year, which was all very exciting. And with that award came a lot of attention on the estate and mounting levels of work. And so in order to strengthen the team, Elisme's husband, Ferdy Visser, came from where he was the winemaker at Breedekloof estate, also in Breedekloof, to join Elisme at Olifantsberg. So they now are a power couple working together on Olifantsberg in order to take it to the next level. Now, as we've mentioned before, Elisme is a very competent viticulturist, and in fact, many of the members of the Breedemakers consult with Elisme with regards to their own vineyards. And we also know that she knows her way around a cellar just fine. But what Ferdy brings to the mix is this amazing kind of small detail cellar nerd type element where he will go into each little node of influence in the winemaking process and ask, how can we do this better? And you'll see later, there's one instance where he chose a particular yeast strain because it goes into autolysis faster than any of the other yeast strains, and we'll see why that's important later. But that's what Ferdy brings. So I guess they're kind of like a Smallville team if you're going to cast your mind back to 2007 or 10, but you have Chloe Sullivan, right, up in Watchtower with all her screens and labs, and that's Ferdy. He's in the cellar. He's got his vials and his tests and his small buttons that he presses from time to time. And then out in the field, you have Elisme, essentially channeling Clark Kent, trying to figure out how am I going to make these vines produce wine that, for all intents and purposes, may as well be from another planet. So as I said earlier, this particular old vine Chenin Blanc is an absolute wine geek treasure trove. For starters, the fruit comes from a block of vines that the Olifantsberg team have been rehabilitating alongside the farmer who owns the vineyard, and they've spent about 5 years building up the soil, sowing cover crop, pruning in a particular way in order to increase both the quantity of the yield from these vines, but also the quality of the fruit to the point where they can happily put it into a bottle and put that ever-coveted old vine seal on the bottle. These were, of course, planted in 1982, which means they're coming up for 40 years old, this vintage. But beyond just being a block of old vines, the fruit for this wine was also harvested in 6 distinct parcels, starting with a fairly low level of ripeness and getting increasingly riper. Now, this early pick parcel has an incredible amount of natural acidity, but also some very delicate volatile aromas. And you want to protect those during fermentation. So that parcel was fermented in stainless steel, where there's no oxygen to wreak havoc with those delicate compounds. But in the richer components, you want a lot more texture. So Elisme decided to ferment those in large format oak, also in foudre, which are sort of giant barrels. And this is where Ferdy's little details come in. He chose a Chardonnay yeast strain called CY3079. And what this strain does is triggers autolysis more quickly. What is autolysis, you might ask? Well, it's when yeast dies, the cells eventually break down. And when they break down, they basically spill their guts into their wine. Kind of like it's seen out of Alien, but that's a good thing because when yeast cells spill their guts into the wine, you get the release of these compounds that contribute a lovely feathery textured element to the wine. So yeast guts in the wine is good, and by choosing that particular strain of yeast, we get to that process more quickly and allow more texture to be imparted in a shorter space of time. Very clever. But enough about yeast guts. How does it actually taste? Well, as I've hinted at before, I consider this wine to be an absolute showstopper. But it is also a wine that perhaps takes a little while to unfold. That doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy it up front, but my suggestion is that serve dinner, have dinner, drink whatever you need to with dinner, and then afterwards serve this wine as a kind of dessert where you just sit calmly over a period of time and let the wine change in the glass as you drink it. On the nose, this guy is superbly complex. There's those kind of floral chamomile elements up front, but then there's also green apple, there's some sweeter, almost caramelized pear, and then on the back, behind it all, there's a sort of dusty, crushed gravel element, which I think makes everything else feel so much more complicated. On the palate, it's not overly heavy, but then I guess the best dancers really are. As the nose suggests, there is a hint of pineapple fruit in there. There's your stone fruit, apricot pit, also some kind of white peach, nectarine fruit going on. Nothing overly ripe. Everything is quite restrained, and yet there's still a lot going on. It kind of flits between the more gentle fruit notes, perhaps that bit of pear that we mentioned, but then it kind of triggers over into a more serious, flinty riverstone element as well. This is a very exciting wine. I've got an extra few bottles set aside just to watch how this unfolds over the next year or two. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. If you have any questions about Elisme or yeast strains or Chenin or old vines, feel free to drop them in the section below, or crack this guy open and leave your thoughts on the site so I can see what you guys thought of it. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo channel so that you can find out more about our exciting rising star winemakers and the Old Vine project and the range of incredible cultivars that we are fermenting across the South African winelands.